Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another live stream video. Today, I'm sitting down with Alec, also known as PSU Everything on Twitter. And as you guessed, we're talking Penn State football for 2023. It's a pleasure to have you on. And
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And I hope everyone, if there's many people that pop in here, enjoy the conversation that we're about to have for Penn State. And don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. So my first question for you is, what is the fan base's attitude on James Franklin? Now, obviously, you've had some ups and downs, especially back when he first came in. The program was kind of, no offense, in the crapper. But I feel like personally, as an outsider and Ohio State fan looking in at the program, I feel like James Franklin has been a positive for the program and almost Harbaugh-esque for Michigan.
Yeah, I'd say most of it is positive. Just you have to look at it the fact of kind of where they were when he took over. Just what a mess, not only kind of the situation was, but also the roster construction where I think they had 3 defensive tackles playing on the offensive line at the time he took over. So, just the point where I'm sure we'll get into it, but now he has 8 or 9 offensive linemen he trusts, where when he started, he maybe had 2. I think, that's just a telltale sign of how much he's done for this program. But I do think that in 2016, obviously everyone would be like A++. And then I think 2017 was kind of like where it's like, oh, we have these loaded rosters and then we're kind of losing dumb games. And it kind of happened more in 2018, although I don't think that roster was nearly as good as 2017. Then, 2019, they lose another game. Most people think they shouldn't have lost at Minnesota. And then, the whole COVID thing happens. They were on a roll in 2021. Clifford gets hurt. That kind of ends that. And then last year, just to bounce back and get 11-2, win the Rose Bowl, I think a lot of people the stock went back up for them on him. Of course, the thing is, you haven't beat Ohio State since 2016, and that is the measuring stick for a lot of the fans. And it looked like after 2020, he had kind of gotten over the Michigan hump, where he had beaten them 3 out of 4 years by that time. 2017, 2019, and 2020 they won, losing in 18. A lot of fans thought, okay, he got over the Michigan hump. It's just Ohio State now. And then Michigan comes back and wins the conference the last 2 seasons, beats Penn State pretty handily this past season. And I think that's kind of turned opinion in a way back into a negative, that it looks like instead of going up, they've kind of fallen down a rung on the ladder now that Michigan has surpassed them again. So I will say, I don't know, it's very hit or miss with depending on who you ask. A lot of people are like, 11-2 winning the Rose Bowl, that's great. And then there's the other side that just wants to look at the 2 in the loss column and measure the season off of that. So it does depend on who you ask. I'm kind of down the middle, where I'm like 11-2 is very good, and you should not be upset with that unless you are Georgia or Alabama, who has 8 5-stars in every single recruiting class. Penn State just doesn't have that. They don't even have 8 5-stars on the roster, I don't think. But then at the same time, it's like, yeah, at one point you have to be able to knock off one of these 2 guys, Michigan or Ohio State, in order to get where you said you're going to take us.
Yes, I feel like you said, it's kind of back and forth, especially from that Michigan perspective. Not to sound biased, but you're always guaranteed 1 loss every year.
Yeah.
And not as much, because we've had more success. And I like the way the games have gone since 2016, especially that 17-18. it is good for the games when, the other team does win. But, for your team, as I'm sure you can attest to, it hurts when you lose. Like,
Yeah.
I think about, what is it, 2017, when you guys lost to Michigan State with the last second field goal, 27-24.
Yeah, those are the games that I think people have more of an issue with. Obviously, that was an 18-point lead they blew in Columbus, but at the same time, it's at Ohio State, and you're like, okay, they lost at Ohio State. I know, like, the lead part makes it look bad. It's those losses, like the Michigan State the next week, who really wasn't a good team, and as it turns out, if they still win that Michigan State game, they probably still would have made the playoff. So, it's that kind of stuff that frustrates people. Obviously, 2021, the 9 overtime Illinois game frustrates a lot of people. It's just kind of like the losses have snowballed at times. And that's been kind of the major gripe with a lot of the fans I've noticed, is that, there's not a lot of shame in losing at an undefeated Iowa or at a one-loss Ohio State team that had 30 future NFL players on it. It's then the next week you struggling with unranked Michigan State, Illinois, Indiana, that kind of stuff, I think, is where a lot more people have an issue.
I can see that. So heading into our next question, how has head coach Franklin impacted recruiting, and what does the 2024 recruiting class look like for Penn State?
Yeah, just in general with Franklin, Bill O'Brien had maybe the hardest recruiting pitch in in the country at the time, and he still. I know Christian Hackberg and Adam Brennan didn't really work out, but the fact that he got the number 2 quarterback and number 1 tight end to commit to him was pretty impressive. But overall, Franklin has put more of an emphasis on recruiting than this program ever had. The recruiting department is massive now. Probably when Paterno was there, they maybe had 1 or 2 recruiting interns. Franklin probably has 10 or 12 now. Just the amount of people you see on Twitter that has like PSU recruiting in their profile. There's a lot of people involved with the recruiting side of things now there. And I mean, to keep up, you have to recruit well. And he's definitely made a positive impact there. I know a lot of people will get on his in-game coaching. There's very little complaints about his recruiting ever. They struggled the COVID year, obviously, not being able to bring guys in for visits. That class was a huge outlier, and it's kind of funny. That class actually turned out pretty decent because you got Kalen King, who's probably going to be a first-round pick in it. You got Landon Tangwell, who is a starter on your offensive line. You got Zakee Wheatley, who's probably going to start safety this year. Like, they actually got a lot of starters out of that small and what a lot of people thought was a disappointing class. So that was funny. But for 24, they already have 24 commits, which is a lot by this point. Filling up the class a lot earlier, and a lot of that has to do with official visits, that guys take these visits in June now. They don't really drag it into the season and go see games for official visits. A lot of guys, visit in June, decision July, August, and that's kind of been the case the last couple of years, I've noticed. This class, I think they're 6th in the country right now on 247. Like, Alabama's still behind them. I think there's a lot of big schools still behind them. I think they'll finish top 15. I don't know about top 10, but they have 16 4-stars again, which is the 3rd straight class. They've had 16 4 or 5-star recruits in the recruiting class. So that is a huge uptick in blue chip recruits on the roster for them from where they were. So 16 out of the 24, that's 66% blue chip ratio. That's really good. Most schools average like 40, I think. Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, I think, are closer to 90. But if you get to 70, that's like top 10 in the rankings type stuff. So yeah, that class, pretty good. It's a good build off of the last 2. Obviously, a lot of people think the 22 class, when all is said down, could go down as the best in program history. So that still has a lot that happened there, but just that class, and then the offensive line class they brought in last year, having 2 5-star guys and then a couple more 4-star guys, was huge too. So this class just kind of builds off of that. Got a lot of receivers, which is nice. They haven't done well recruiting receivers lately, got 4 in this class, and they did really well with defensive tackles this class, which for first-year defensive line coach Deion Barnes to go out, get 4 defensive tackles, one a top 100 guy in Liam Andrews, another 4-star guy who was a 5-star actually in T.A. Cunningham. So he's done really well right away. So yeah, the 24 class is pretty solid, I'd say. Not too many complaints. Not a lot of top 100 guys, but overall pretty solid class, and they filled a lot of their needs that they didn't address in the last 2 classes.
I mean, yes, I'm looking at 24/7 right now. It's got Georgia at 1, Ohio State 2, Florida 3, Michigan 4, Bama 5, Penn State 6.
Yeah.
Yep, 24 commits, like you said. 16 are 4 stars, and 8 of them are 3 stars, which I know is about, you guys, but I think the star system's a little bit of a joke because you could have a 3-star as a recruit and he ends up being a 5-star because he plays extremely well into the system and he shows out every week.
Yeah, I'm not someone that looks at an individual recruit's star ranking, like it's, gospel. I think overall class rankings matter. You could see that by the fact that Georgia and Alabama have been 1 or 2, I think, the past 5 years. I think an overall class ranking matters, but I also like a lot of people, and obviously on Twitter, I tweet about pretty much every commit. And when it's a 3-star, a lot of people are like, oh, too many 3 stars, blah, blah, blah. And I'll point out, like, your Abby picture is Trace McSorley. I was like, did you know he was a 3-star that most schools recruited to be a safety? And, Oliwolf Fashanu, probably going to be a top 5 pick. He was a 3-star offensive lineman back in the 2020 recruiting class, I believe. So while I think an overall class ranking does actually have some weight into correlation on the field, an individual guy can definitely outplay rankings. And, we've been on the other end of that too. A lot of people would say Hackenberg was a disappointment. Justin Shorter was the number 1 wide receiver in his class. He started, I think, 4 games here. So yeah, overall, I agree with, individual. I don't look at it all the way, but I just consistently being in the top 10 as a class is a big thing.
I would definitely agree. So let's see. So next, with what kind of impact has Manny Diaz made with the defense? And do you think it's a positive? Do you think it's a negative? Do you think there's room to grow possibly?
I'll start off with the to grow part. I think they could grow actually, because a lot of the impact guys, obviously everyone was in their first year in his system last year. They weren't all that familiar with it. And you had a lot of key guys who, Abdul Carter was a true freshman. Chop Robinson was kind of a rotational player his freshman year at Maryland and then became a starter here at Penn State. Another 5-star freshman, Denai Dennis Sutton, got some rotational time. A lot of the safeties are young too. A lot of guys saw their first action last year. The corners are older, but a lot of the safeties are younger guys, redshirt freshmen and sophomores. So I do think there is room to grow and, kind of room to grow literally too, because the defensive tackles had to get a little bigger. And Franklin actually today at Media Day said they've gotten a couple guys over 300 pounds apparently. I'll wait for the games to start to see it, but just them, getting a little bigger on the defensive line will obviously go a big way too. So I do think there's some room to grow there for them there. In terms of if Diaz is a good fit, I actually think he is, because he definitely plays to the strengths of a lot of the guys on this defense, which is they're fast, athletic. They were first in the Big Ten in sacks last year. It might have been top 3 in takeaways too. I don't have that number off the top of my head, but his kind of thing was bend, don't break. We'll make the big play. They gave up a decent amount of yards last year actually, but they always had a timely sack or an interception or a strip sack. And, that kept points off the board where if you look at it, their points per game probably didn't really correlate with the amount of yards they were giving up. So I kind of look at the Auburn game. They only gained Auburn by 44 yards, I think, yet Auburn only had 12 points. That's kind of just because they had, I think, 7 sacks and 3 turnovers. It's just kind of the way he does things. It's an exciting brand. It worked a little bit in the Ohio State game, and then it didn't really work in the Michigan game. And those are the 2 concerns, obviously, because those are 2 games you have to win if you want to get to where you want to go. So
Right.
that needs probably a little improvement, where they need to be a little more just physical up front against the run, especially. But overall, I thought his defense was actually a step up from what they had before that with Brent Pry. So it was a little faster. That they didn't give up as many huge plays. There were, a lot more dink and dunk plays that they gave up. But I thought overall, and the other thing is they didn't really blow any big leads. Like Pry was the defense coordinator for all those Ohio State games we were just talking about. So yeah, the fact that he didn't really botch any big leads either was kind of nice to see.
So, where do you think overall people stand with Manny Diaz? Because I remember, again, looking from an outside perspective, when Penn State first hired Manny, it was kind of like, oh no, what's Penn State doing? Are we taking a step back? Why are we getting worse by hiring Manny Diaz? Because they were completely focused on his very first head coaching job at Miami. And nobody was thinking that Manny is primarily a defensive coach. Like, defense is his strong suit.
Right. I will say that from what I know from just being on social media and being on message boards with Penn State fans is Manny Diaz was kind of looked at as a disappointment because a lot of people were obsessed with Elijah Robinson, the Texas A&M defensive line coach. I think he was like 247 Sports Recruiter of the Year, like 2 straight years or something. He's actually a Penn State letterman. So that, I think a lot of people are just attracted to the fact it's a Penn State guy. He's a crazy recruiter, even though he had 0 defensive coordinator experience. I think so many people were just so high on him that when it wasn't him, it was just an automatic letdown. Like, it could have probably been Bill Belichick and people would have been upset the way they were acting over Robinson. But yeah, I didn't look at it as bad when Diaz came, because being a head coach and being a coordinator are totally different things. You don't have to worry about both sides of the ball. You don't really do any you don't do as much recruiting. Like, you don't have to worry about the entire team's recruiting. There's just a lot less that goes into it. And a lot more guys are just comfortable not being the lead guy and just kind of being off in the corner and doing their thing. And I think Penn State actually has 2 really good coordinators for that, also on offense with Mike Yurcich, 2 guys that maybe wouldn't make the best head coaches, but they're really good at being coordinators. And, like Alabama always seems to get those guys where it's like failed as head coaches, they go with Saban and they're just an elite coordinator, because the head coaching just isn't for everyone, it seems. Diaz might be that guy. I'm interested to see what he does after the year. Let's say the Northwestern job is offered to him, just using that as an example. Is that the kind of job he would take? Whereas it's like, it's because I kind of feel like he failed at Miami, so I don't think he'd ever go to a school like as big of a name or with as much pressure as Miami, for a while. But if he goes down to a school like, an Akron, something like that, is being the Penn State defense coordinator a better gig than that? So I kind of look at like those middle of the line schools where it's still Power 5, but there's not a lot of pressure on you, like a Northwestern. Like, would that be a job for him? So I'm interested to see what happens with him after the year. But I do think any fan that was skeptical before last season, probably by the 4th or 5th game last year, that was calmed down. And by the end of the season, everyone's like, oh my God, we can't lose this guy. Like, how much is he making? So there was a lot of turnaround there for sure.
What is the opinion of Drew Allar, and does he live up to his recruiting hype? And what does everyone think of the offense itself?
Yeah, just starting with what people think about Drew Aller. It was the first home game of the season last year, and Sean Clifford sailed a pass in the first quarter on second down. The student section broke out into a "We Want Drew" chant, so that's kind of where that was going. Yeah, there's not a single fan in this fan base that dislikes or has anything bad to say about this kid. I'll just say that right now. In terms of living up to his recruiting ranking, obviously by the end of it, he was, I think, on the composite, the number 4 quarterback. On 247, he was the number 1 quarterback. So high praise either way. He has the build. He's 6'5", 240, I think. He got comps at Ben Roethlisberger, I think, just because of his physical stature. The arm is massive, and Penn State actually did not go downfield that much the past few years. They went in 2019. Pretty much every single touchdown pass play was a deep ball to KJ Hamler, Jahan Dotson. Obviously, it helps when those are the two guys you're throwing the ball to, but Penn State kind of got away from that as Clifford dealt with injuries then and struggled the last couple seasons. So I think the deep ball is going to come back. The thing is with Allert, he struggles with a lot of like the intermediate passes. I was actually watching a film study by For the Bloggy, which if you're a Penn State fan and you want to get some in-depth film stuff, I do recommend watching those videos. And a lot of his problems is with footwork, where passes out to the flat, out to the numbers. He was sailing, but everything in between the numbers down the seams, perfect strike. So it's just something when his footwork is off. If he corrected that this offseason, which I know he does work with a quarterback coach at home, that will help him, because I don't think anyone's worried about the yards or the big plays or anything. It's just kind of having a competitive completion percentage, I guess, where Penn State's never been a school where the quarterback was a huge completion guy. Sean Clifford's, I think, the career leader in completion percentage at Penn State with like 63%. So it's not a big thing at all. If he just is in that 60 to 63 range, I think most people would be happy. I know it was a small sample size. He was at 58% last season in the mop-up duty he did. So I think he definitely has the talent to get there. And I think he also has enough surrounding pieces where early on the pressure will be off of him. You mentioned just the whole offense. Obviously, we could debate who has the best running back room in the Big Ten all for 4 hours. It doesn't really matter. The truth is, like, all three of the ones you're going to talk about are really good, and Penn State is one of the three. And I think just having those two guys behind him is going to take a lot of the pressure off. Obviously, having, I mentioned earlier, Olu Fashanu, projected top 5 pick, protecting his blind side, that's huge. And while a lot of the receivers around him don't have the gaudy numbers, they're veteran guys. Keandre Lambert-Smith is a senior. Dante Cephas, who they're bringing in from Kent State, is a 5th-year guy. Tyler Warren and Theo Johnson, I think, are true seniors this year. So there's a lot of experience around him, which I think will also help. And there's a lot of young guys with talent too. Amari Evans, a speedy wide receiver, a true freshman last year. He's a name I think is going to come up a lot more this year as Penn State kind of pushes the ball downfield more, just because he kind of has that deep playability to him. So overall, I'm not expecting Allard to be Joe Burrow or, even in the CJ Stroud, like anything like that. But I also think we can expect him to put up numbers that a Penn State quarterback really ever hasn't. I think he could get to 30 touchdowns. It depends how much they give him a chance to, because of the run game. Obviously, they're going to run the ball a lot, but I think he has a chance to put up a lot of yards at Penn State.
I do think that when he figures everything out, he will definitely be a threat.
Yeah.
To the other defenses for sure. So does Penn State have the ability and pieces in place to have another New Year's Six bowl season?
Yeah, that one I will confidently say yes. I just kind of looking at it, the pieces are definitely there. The schedule is kind of favorable, I'd say, outside of Ohio State and Michigan. Obviously, you kind of look at 10 wins as what you need, sometimes 9, but usually 10 as what you need to get to a New Year's Six Bowl. They have Iowa at home. They go to Illinois. That'll be an interesting game early in the season too. It's Drew Aller's first Big Ten game actually, so that is something to keep an eye on. Michigan State, Penn State historically has had some house of horrors when they go to Michigan State. This game is actually at Ford Field, neutral site in a dome on a Friday night, so I think that takes a lot of the scary part out of that game. So yeah, they don't play Wisconsin or Minnesota this year either. So I do think they could easily. 9 wins to me feels like a lock. 10, I think they should get there pretty easily too. So I would say New Year's Six Bowls. That should be the floor for this team, is what I'm going to say, because just kind of being a projected top 10 team, some people have you going 11-1. I do feel like with the expectations they probably have on themselves, because Franklin even said today, he's like, this is the roster I have the least question marks with since I've been here. And he's been to 4 New Year's Six Bowls before this. So if he's feeling that way, then I'm going to say they definitely have the ability and pieces to do that again.
I mean, I would hope so.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're looking, which I know we'll get into pretty soon, but if we're looking outside of, let's just say, your 2 obvious losses, or, most likely losses, right, maybe not obvious. As long as you don't have a slip up or whatever that was last season with Illinois or anybody like that, I agree. I don't see how this team doesn't reach 10 wins in the regular season and make another New Year's Six Bowl.
Yeah, I just, the kind of thing is, last year a lot of people were not that high on this team going into the year, and the fact that they got to 10-2 in the regular season was actually took some people by surprise. I wasn't too surprised by it actually, but now with Aller coming in for Clifford, the main thing with this fan base was like Clifford is the governor. He's what's holding them back. He's what's keeping them from beating Ohio State or getting back over the Michigan hump. So if Aller's in here and we consider him an upgrade, then it should be more than that. So I would say, yeah.
I mean, now as far as Clifford, do you think that there was media-wise too much pressure put on Clifford when it came to Ohio State? I mean, because I remember, as I go back and watch some of the old Penn State games through his grandpa years of being at Penn State, because he was at Penn State for so freaking long.
Right.
When they talked about Clifford, majority of the storyline was he played at an Ohio high school. He played at St. X.
Yep.
And is this kid really as good as they say? Because Ohio State didn't look at him. So, is there something there? Like the whole storyline was like, is there something there that, Sean's creating himself to try to beat Ohio State, to say, hey, look, you messed up by not recruiting me. But it never came to fruition because Ohio State was always so loaded.
Yeah, I don't know how much media pressure there was there. A lot of people in like the Penn State media, I think, were pretty realistic about, Clifford and his ceiling. I think there are people in the fan base that, thought he should be at like UConn, and that's also wrong. But, he probably wasn't going to be the guy to win, a playoff game ever. He was somewhere in the middle, and his career record kind of shows that. For me, with him in Ohio State, it's kind of funny, I guess. So 2019, he actually gets hurt in that game, and they were down, I think, 21-0 at that point. Levis comes in, makes it 21-17, and then Ohio State scored again. That was the game. 2020, I mean, that was the worst Penn State team in maybe 15 years. So I thought he actually kept them in that game somewhat decently. 2021, that team was already pretty down bad, and I know he was pretty banged up with some rib injuries by the time that game came along. So I think they lost that game by 12 or something like that. The fact that they kind of made that interesting, was impressive, honestly. And then last year, Clifford was bad kind of early on in that game, and then he, for like three quarters, was the best I think anyone ever saw him play. It's pretty impressive, honestly. And then kind of at the end, I don't know how much of that is on him, as it was that JTT was just the best player on the field, and Penn State had literally their third string right tackle against him. No offense, but I mean, the guy he was going up against is actually retired from football now. So I think that was a mismatch. So I think, that played a role just as much as Clifford's abilities did. I mean, he was tormenting the whole game pretty much. So yeah, for me, Clifford, I don't know, like it was never as bad as people made it out to be, I don't think, but you also had to be kind of realistic with what his ceiling was.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess his time in the pros will tell. I mean,
yeah, he was a 5th round pick, which is, I mean, that's impressive either way, I guess.
Oh, yeah. All right. So let's jump into the meat of things.
All right.
When looking at the schedule, can Penn State make the college football playoff? That's something they've never done before.
Yep.
They honestly, I don't know how you feel about it, but even coming from an Ohio State fan, you should have got in 2016.
Yeah, 2016, that one hurts. It sucks that it took them losing to Michigan by 28 or whatever that was to kind of wake up. They also got, I don't, going back to that season, I guess everyone points to the getting blown out at Michigan. Like, even if they would have beat Pitt earlier, it wouldn't have mattered because of how bad they lost at Michigan. I don't know about that. I still feel like if they beat Pitt, maybe they get in, no matter how bad that Michigan loss was. But yeah, that season, that was kind of a bummer. But going to this season, it's interesting because Penn State matches up with Ohio State 100 times better than it does Michigan. The only problem is you play Ohio State on the road, I think, and Penn State hasn't won in the shoe since 2011, and I know that wasn't a very good Ohio State team. That was a team going through some things. So if you want to say the last time both teams were humming along that Penn State won there, it would have been 2008, and that game was like 10-3 or something like that. So not what the Big Ten is now, with especially these two teams. That one's interesting to me. I'll never pick Penn State to win at the shoe, with now that both teams are kind of up on a competitive level. One's not down going through a rebuild for any reason. I'll still probably would never pick Penn State to win there. I'll be happy if they do, but I'm not trying to be, as down the middle as I can be. I probably never pick that. But the Michigan one's interesting to me because Michigan is a terrible matchup for Penn State, but whenever Michigan comes to Beaver Stadium, Penn State always makes that game a little closer than it should. Like, I thought the 2021 game, I mean, Penn State was one blown coverage away from honestly winning that game, and Michigan was 50 times the team Penn State was by the time that game rolled around, with just all the injuries Penn State had and all the losses they had at that point. And, Penn State took it to the wire, and, Penn State beat them at home in 19 and 17. 15, they actually, I think that game was like 28-12, something like that, but it was kind of close up until the fourth. Like, no matter how good Michigan's been, Penn State's always either hung around or won when Michigan comes to town. So that's an interesting one to me, just because it is home. I won't be the whiteout. It's going to be a new November game, which It was in 2021 too, and that game was pretty close. So I'm not going to just scoff at that. And obviously the Ohio State game last year was also a noon game. So, and that was still a pretty good environment and a game that pretty much went down in the middle of the fourth quarter. So, it does come down to those two games. I'm going to respect Illinois and Iowa. I think Penn State struggled with 11 a.m. games, and that's what that Illinois game is. They have a pretty good defense. I know they're going through some changes on offense, especially with their bell cow back, Chase Brown gone. So a little interested to see what Illinois looks like. Iowa, the defense is going to be there. We'll see with the offense. I know they brought in new pieces, but to me, it's like I don't think it matters who the pieces are. A lot of it is more like the play calling and the philosophy of that offense. You kind of look at Charlie Jones, a guy who had like 20 career catches at Iowa, and then he led the country in yards and receptions or whatever at Purdue. I think that says more about Iowa's system than the talent. So I'll never be too high on Iowa's offense, honestly, but I'm going to respect them there. Maryland, just that being right before the Michigan game, you have to at least raise an eyebrow at it, I think. Maryland's not very good in the trenches, but they do have skill position players that can make things interesting. So, that's also a game to keep an eye on. But the thing is, I think they could be 11-1, but it depends kind of how this whole, because I think all three of these teams might end up 11-1. So then it kind of comes down to, what's the tiebreaker? Who's going to the Big Ten championship game? And so I think if 11-1 got you right in the playoff, I would say, yeah, they can make the playoff. The problem is 11-1, you might still be the third best team in your division. So I don't know if, it doesn't get you in the playoffs. So that's interesting to me. Just, it's a hard question to answer just because I think all three of these teams are so loaded, and kind of Penn State getting Michigan at home, where Penn State plays horrible in Ann Arbor and then plays Michigan really well at home is kind of, the game I'm circling as if they're going to do it, it's probably got to be that one.
When I think about Penn State, Michigan, I think a lot about last year and the GIF meme that I'm sure people have probably seen before, where, it's Sean Clifford. He's broken wide open. It should be a 60-yard touchdown, and he just Daniel Jones it. Flop. I think so. Let's see, Delaware, check, easy dub. UMass, check. Rutgers, check. Northwestern, with the way that the program or the state of the program's in right now, check.
Yeah.
No offense, because I like the Wildcats.
Yeah.
West Virginia intrigues me. I'm trying to get tickets or a ticket to go to that game.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
I would love to be there. The only problem,
the tailgating scene, I think, might be better than the game, honestly.
The only problem is it's like 3-4 hours from Columbus.
Okay. Yeah.
Illinois is tricky.
Mm-hmm.
Ohio State, I'm going to give it to us, of course. Iowa, like you said, I think you guys benefit from the fact that it's in Happy Valley.
Yeah.
Because you guys do tend to struggle, but also miraculously have great games out in Iowa. The one below Iowa and next to Ohio State, that game right after Ohio State, I would hope. Now, I know y'all got your revenge the year later, but I would hope that game still boils. That 2020 Indiana game still boils. Yeah. I've got a huge Indiana friend, but I'm sorry, Indiana did not win that game.
No, that was
history books, but come on, man.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Penn State kind of got it all out of their system. They shut out Indiana the following year, 24-0, made Indiana's offense look really bad, and then last year obviously routed them. What was that, 45-14 or something like that, I think.
something like that.
Indiana's kind of down again. You know, a lot of people were. I was actually kind of high on them in 2022. I thought Penn State would beat them, but actually kind of liked some of the offensive pieces they had there. But yeah, Indiana at home, I don't know. I feel like that game coming off the Ohio State game, I think it's gonna be a slow start. Honestly, it was a slow start this past year with Penn State and Indiana. I think Indiana led 14-10 in the first quarter at one point or something like that, and then Penn State outscored them 35-0 the rest of the game or something. So yeah, I could see that maybe being a slow starter and then, you know, kind of pulling away second half.
Yeah, so I mean, realistically, I mean, I can see 11-1, maybe 10-2, because the trick is that Maryland game. Because
Yeah.
even though Ohio State's not directly the week before Indiana,
Mm-hmm.
I would almost still call Maryland a trap game.
Yeah, you know,
because Michigan is the next week.
Right. Michigan being the next week, win or lose to Ohio State, it still pretty much is the season. So, you know, even if they lost to Ohio State, the pressure's still going to be on to beat Michigan. They're going to be thinking about it. And obviously, they somehow beat Ohio State, the pressure's still going to be on to try to go 12-0 and finish the thing. So either way, there's pressure there. The funny thing is with Maryland, Penn State has played a lot better at Maryland than when they've played Maryland in Happy Valley. Penn State has 2 losses to Maryland since they joined the Big Ten. They're both in Beaver Stadium. Penn State beat Maryland's, I think, 66-3 in 2017. Beat them 59-0 in 2019, and then it was 31-14, something like that in 2021. So Penn State honestly plays Maryland better in Maryland than they do at Penn State. So that's actually a game I'm fine with being on the road, as you know, you never kind of want a game on the road unless it's like Northwestern and Rutgers. But honestly, like I'm okay with that. Penn State's played better there for some reason. It's kind of funny.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I'm kind of stuck at the same. It's going to come down to, as long as there's no slip up, like West Virginia, the way that they're going right now, I think they are still looking for themselves. So I think that's a win. You know, like I said, for everybody else, I think it's going to come down to Ohio State and both Michigan teams.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know Michigan State's neutral site, but it's still in the state of Michigan. It's like an hour and a half, I think, from East Lansing. So, I mean, Michigan State fans, I'm sure, will travel well. For me, it's going to come down to Ohio State and Michigan.
Yeah, just really quick on Michigan State. Just the fact that that game is inside is a huge deal for Penn State. If you remember, we were talking about how they lost there in 2017. There was like a 2-hour thunderstorm delay that game that really got Penn State's offense started out slow and then got going. Then the delay happened and never got going again. And then 2019, Penn State won there, and it poured the whole time. And then 2021, they lost there, and it was a blizzard where Penn State's wearing the all-white uniforms, and you couldn't make out the receivers running down the field. It's just every time they go there, the weather sucks. So just that game being inside is a win, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I do, to your point, I do think it benefits Michigan State for sure. Or I mean, Penn State for sure.
Yeah.
So if we just look at the question itself, where, if not the CFP, where do you think Penn State ends up?
What are the playoff bowls this year? I know one's the Rose Bowl.
The Rose Bowl's always paired with the Sugar Bowl.
Sugar Bowl. So I'm going to say Orange Bowl then. I think that they haven't played there since 2005. Yeah, I'd say probably the Orange Bowl. I think Franklin's trying to win every single New Year's Six Bowl, which would be kind of impressive, honestly. But if they don't make the playoff, I do think they probably get the Orange Bowl.
Okay. I have two interesting kind of side note questions left for you.
Okay.
First of all, what would be your top 5 Penn State games ever?
That's a good one. The Ohio State, like, ever, oh, man. Am I putting, like, since the beginning of time, or where are we going with this?
Just wherever you want to go.
All right, man. I'll probably. So that's gonna take me an hour to think about. I'll probably go, like, since Franklin took over. I'll start there.
Okay.
I'd probably put. I think the Big Ten championship comeback should be one. Actually, I think that was just so entertaining. Just winning the conference when no one saw it coming back from 28-7. That's gotta be one for me. Two, obviously, I think the Ohio State game, just because you don't get to that Big Ten title game without that. The 2017 Michigan game was really interesting because it was kind of like their first prove it test of the year, I think, and they kind of had to get some revenge on Michigan for, like we talked about, more or less keeping them out of the playoff the year before. So that was a big win. Then I'll go last year, going down. I know Auburn was not good, but going down there, everyone's like, oh, SEC, you can't win down here, blah, blah, blah. And just kind of run them out of the building by the third quarter was really satisfying, honestly. And then the Trace McSorley to Juwan Johnson walk-off in Iowa, 2017, last play of the game on 4th and goal. That was just crazy. I just remember watching that. That was like an out-of-body experience, honestly. So that game I do like. So I know I'm missing one or two probably, but just off the top of my head, right, doing that on the spot, those are like the 5 I'd come up with for Franklin. I don't know. Actually, shout out the Pinstripe Bowl against Boston College too in 2014. That game was kind of, so there was a funny part of that a lot of people don't know, but that was Derek Jeter's last year with the Yankees. In his last game, he hit the walk-off single or whatever. And Sam Ficken, the Penn State kicker who had been through all kinds of stuff because he missed like 4 field goals in a game 2 years earlier and everyone hated him, and then he became good. He had Derek Jeter's locker for that game and hit the quote-unquote walk-off extra point. So that's just a little something that I think is always cool. But yeah, that game actually, just them getting off the bowl ban, and that was also a comeback. Just coming back, winning that game. That it didn't mean much, in the grand scheme of things, but that game is always just kind of cool to me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. For me, it would probably. So I agree with your 2016 games, but all time, if you look from a Penn State perspective, I would probably say 2005 Ohio State.
Yeah.
2006 Orange Bowl, the walk-off over Bobby Bowden.
Mm-hmm.
And probably the 95 Rose Bowl against Oregon.
Yeah.
I think it was 95.
Yeah, because that was the 94 team that was 11, or whatever. Yeah. That's, that season too, if you want to go there, I think they beat Ohio State 63-0 or something along those. Yeah,
that was insane.
I did go back. I've watched every single game from that season on YouTube, actually. Wow. So I do know that team a little bit because I just was told about how good they were, and I'm like, all right, well, I'm gonna see. And I was honestly very impressed by that team. It's funny because it was better than some of the early 2000s Penn State offenses. It's like they kind of went backwards after that team. It was weird, but yeah, that team entertaining. Obviously, the 2 national championships in the 80s over Georgia and Miami, I'm pretty sure was the other one. Those 2, obviously, I think all time 1 and 2, but just kind of making it smaller. So I'm not dragging this out for 2 hours, just going with the Franklin ones. But yeah.
So my last question for you is, who is on Alex, Mount Rushmore of Penn State football?
This actually just got brought up the other day, and like I tweeted and got roasted a bunch of times. I was like, oh, maybe not. John Cappelletti has to be on it. Only Heisman winner ever. There are so many linebackers. Shane Conlon behind me won a national championship, big time linebacker. I think you got to put him on there. That was close though. I would put, and a lot of people I would put Wally Trippett on there, the running back. He was actually, if you look up the story, he's kind of where the "We Are" chant originated from. One of the first African-American players to play for Penn State. They went down to play in the Cotton Bowl, and he was told, like, they were told, like, they can't play here or whatever. And one of the team captains said, like, we're Penn State, like, we all play or we don't play. The last part I don't have totally accurate, I don't think, but something along those lines. And, that's kind of where the chant stuck. So just kind of the meaning behind that and the chant itself kind of being the school's thing. I think he has to be on there. Just there's so much story with him there. And then I feel like the 94 team, I'd put someone on there, either Kajana Carter or Kerry Collins. I feel like someone has to be on there, but you could argue like Jack Ham if you wanted to go a little more present day. A lot of great linebackers, Paul Puz, Sean Lee. A lot of people put Saquon on there. I don't have a problem with that just because they were winning the big, like, he's kind of the guy when you look at how did Penn State football get back from, the hole they were in, just the problem, everyone will point to Saquon Barkley. So I see like the significance there in that. Obviously they didn't win a national championship, and, he didn't win a Heisman, even though he was top 4 in voting the one year. So yeah, I could see that argument, but those three I would definitely put, and then my fourth spot is like all over the place.
Do you feel like Penn State's had a quarterback that would deserve to be up there?
That's a good one. Collins had a really good 94, was really high draft pick. Obviously, if they would have actually played for the national championship, like, they probably should have gotten the chance to. He's probably looked at even in a different light than he already is, even though he's pretty up there. Trace McSorley held all the records, and a lot of people would say him. Now Sean Clifford holds all those records, and people wouldn't put him there for a lot of personal vendettas, it feels like. But so I the quarterback thing is close. Kerry Collins though kind of gets the nod as the best one. Todd Blackledge too, obviously won a national championship, so I think he's in the discussion too. It's interesting because the funny thing is a lot of the quarterbacks that did a lot of winning at Penn State don't have the stats, and then a lot of the guys that have the stats don't have
the wins,
the undefeated seasons and the national championships. Yeah, so the Penn State quarterback situation all time is really funny to look at, and maybe Aller's the guy that gets the combination of the two. That would be nice. So yeah, it is funny. Just kind of look at that.
I mean, I don't know. I would kind of agree with yours. If it was me, I'd probably have. Now I know we didn't take this route, but for mine, it would probably be Joe Pa for obvious reasons. Kajana Carter.
Yeah.
It would probably be, what's his name? Michael Robinson, the 05 quarterback.
Oh, yeah, Michael Robinson, yeah.
And then that linebacker for you guys that made the infamous
LeVar Arrington
sack on Troy Smith.
Oh, not LeVar Arrington. Tamba Lee, was that? I'm trying to think. I think it might have been him.
Or he was, he was the like super well-known linebacker for you guys back in like 05, 06.
Oh, so 05 they had, man, so that would have been like Paul Puzlesny.
I think it was him.
He was a younger guy though that year. Man, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I'm pretty sure Tom Bahali was on that team. I totally did miss, actually, it's coming back to me. LeVar Arrington would also be a pretty hard guy to leave off that list.
Yeah.
He was 90, 98, 99. He would be difficult to leave off as well. So it is actually, for a school that only has one Heisman winner, it is hard to kind of find the guy. And the thing is,
Yeah.
the quarterbacks that won the championships don't have huge numbers either. So it is interesting. Yes,
It'd almost be like easier because I feel like from all the research I've done as far as Mount Rushmore's, the program Mount Rushmore is the hardest one to do. Like,
yeah, it is.
having a coach, one offensive guy, one defensive guy, and one, extra guy. It's a lot easier weeding out the Rushmores if you go position by position, like the QB Mount Rushmore and etc.
Right. Yeah, it is. I mean, even running back and linebacker, I'd probably still take me 2 hours to figure out the right four for each. Quarterback would probably be McSorley, Blackledge, Collins, and Robinson or Daryl Clark, I would say, would probably be the four. I think that one's not too bad. Tight end would be an interesting conversation, actually, with the way they've produced them in the last few years. But yeah, those are fun arguments to have. But I feel like with Penn State, there's just never going to be a right answer with that Mount Rushmore for overall program.
Yeah, it's definitely hard sometimes. Well, I think that about wraps things up. Where can people find you?
Yeah, so if you want the Penn State only content, that's at PSU underscore strong. YouTube stuff, I actually do some of that. Penn State podcasts, do baseball stuff, that kind of stuff too. That's Whitaker Media Network. On YouTube, just type that in, it'll be there. So those are kind of the two main places you could find me for sports content.
All right. Well, we definitely appreciate you coming on, and go follow and sub to all the socials over there.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Yep.